Hey everyone, Mrhappy here, and welcome to Mondays with Mrhappy, aka Mrhappy Mondays, a weekly Q&A show where you ask me questions and I answer them. It's a hat day. I couldn't be bothered this morning. I woke up like 30 minutes late because I got home late last night, and then I was like, nope, you know what? Hat day. Rolled out of bed, hat on, teeth brushed, ready to go. And now here I am. After a day full of Dragon's Dogma 2, I am ready to do some Q&A. So for updates on the other channel, I think the only video I got out last week on the separate channel is my Dragon's Dogma 2 character creator. I've just been swarming my hours with other things as of late, especially with streaming. And then on the VOD channel, I think all of 7 Rebirth is there now. I know for certain all of Unicorn Overlord is there. But I think all of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is also there. I'll have to double check that. And Dragon's Dogma 2, I'm going to start putting out this week onto the VOD channel. It's been a lot of hours and they've been a lot of fun. So I'm playing the PS5 version and it's been working great. So yay for me. However, I have some other stuff I need to get to after this. So with that update, I want to get right into the Q&A. Thanks to the sponsors over on Patreon for supporting. Appreciate y'all for support. I mean, that's everything here is free. So, you just get to enjoy this and then it's that. And if you want to do it, it's there, but you don't have to because it's here. Got it? Good. With that, let's get started. First of all, yes, I did forget World of Final Fantasy last week. I know it was not deliberate. I just forgot. On to this, hashtag Mondays with Mrhappy. Hello to you and the cats. Hope you are all doing well. Doing swell. My question to you is, what quality of life addition change would you like to see in 14 the most? Friends list updated. Better friends list, better social list. I think I made a video about that. And it's something that they really need to work on for the future of the game, because it cannot keep being as dated looking and feeling as it is, because it just draws people away. It's just one of those things when people are like actively looking at things that they don't like about the game, that's like at the top of the list. And while I doubt anyone would sub or unsub over that, it certainly doesn't help when people are feeling any sort of negativeness about the game. When they have that experience, they go, oh, on top of that, there's this. It's one of those. So I'm definitely going to go with the social list needing a massive overhaul. Hashtag Mondays with Mrhappy. Hey, Happy. Hi. Hope you're doing good. Thumbs up. I recently dove headfirst into getting the Big Fish title. Bless your soul. And I've had my eye on the world-class troller as well. Do you remember how long it took for you to complete your grind? Any tips to help stay sane during it all? First of all, it's easier now because we didn't have triple hook when I did it. I don't know how that actually affects it in terms of like how often you use triple hook over trying to go for multiple double hooks, but that's just because I haven't fished in, well, like forever at this point. There are guides on what baits to use, what the point values are for everything, and I would highly advise finding those because they will make your decision-making much easier. And it took me about 3 months at 3 fishing stops a day. But at some point, I got so good at ocean fishing that I was averaging over 20,000 points a boat. And like I said, that's even easier to do now. So you could probably cut that time down, especially if you were doing more than 3 boats a day, to, I don't know, I would assume you could cut that down to a month or even under that if you were really, really consistent about it. But on top of that, I would highly avoid the new Ruby Sea route. From what I've seen, all the point totals are most of the time worse. There might be like one route in the Ruby Sea that's better than one of the terrible routes on the original, on the Strafe ones. So, I mean, I don't have that exact information, but the guides would. So they'll give you the idea of when that decision is better to make. But generally speaking, I found that the better ones in the Strait were better than the best ones of the Ruby Sea. So that's at least a general piece of advice to that one. Best of luck on it. It's really not that bad anymore, but I don't want to talk about it. Hashtag Mondays with Mrhappy. Hi there. Hi. Hope you're doing well. I'd say so. Been enjoying the content lull, some achievement hunting, and it got me thinking the majority of achievements become easier to get as subsequent expansions release due to us getting more tools. Aloha, stop yowling. I already fed you. He's just sitting here yowling at me. For example, it's easier for us to rack up ocean fishing points now. Wow, perfectly fitting. However, there are a few cases I can think of where achievements can arguably become harder once the expansion is passed. Shadowbringers relics are more of a pain to get as an example. With that said, can you think of any potential current goals or achievements that could be harder to get after DT is released? The only achievement that you don't want to wait on, you want to be working on it immediately, and that's if you ever actually care about getting it, is the Leave Quest one. Because if I recall correctly, it takes 7 years to get. So it's not even that it becomes harder as more expansions come out, but the longer you wait to start working on specifically that achievement, the worse it'll get. Now, that does conflict with some other things you can do, such as the Anima Weapon quest, if you wanted to use those for the chest for the Amaranth's Vilekins, but you're way better off doing crafting and gathering than using your leaf quest, so I probably wouldn't hold on to them for that particular case. Other than that, the interest in S ranks always remains the same for hunts, and the interest in most content remains the same. So really, DR would have been the one example that I would have given you, or the Shadowbringers relics as a whole. Hashtag Mondays with Mrhappy. Hello, hello. Now that the expansion release has drifted back to the usual summer time frame, do you think they'll try to speed up the patch cycle again and have 8.0 release in summer of 26? Nope. I think we'll be looking at winter of 26. I think the alternate between summer and winter releases is the most likely thing. I don't think they can just choose to speed up dev time. And I think that would be counterintuitive as to the reason they initially slowed it down. It was to give their developers extra vacation, an extra 2 weeks of vacation throughout the year, and lighter deadlines so they would have better working conditions and they could generally produce better content. Now, in Endwalker, that's debatable that was achieved, whether that was because of their individual goals or, as Yoshi P says, they've oversimplified certain things and not challenged their developers enough. Who knows? We don't know what the actual reason is for the actual result of things at Endwalker. But I sincerely doubt they tell all the developers, yeah, we're taking that time back away from you. You know what I mean? Hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Hi, Haps. Hi. I've been making my way through the Eden raids minimum item level, and they've been so much fun. Are there any mechanics you really hope don't show up in Fru? For me, if I get an away with theme marker, I'm going to start sobbing. I think the problem is the things that we hope wouldn't show up are also kind of the things we both hope and expect to show up. Specifically Light Rampant. Pretty much any of the Shiva mechanics that griefed people over the years were a pretty big deal. But quite frankly, I never found Eden's mechanics to be all that, or I'm sorry, the entirety of the raids, all that bad. It was either that they were fun or they were unfun, but rarely was it that they were genuinely not good. I think some people, for example, may look at E6 and how the tanks just have to throw like 5 or 6 shield lobs. I've never had an issue when fights are designed like that, because for me, if it's like, what if the boss was untargetable the whole time? You'd just be standing there. I mean, don't get me wrong, shield lobbing isn't much better. Sorry, I'm still petting Aloha because he's just so needy right now. It's just like neither situation is technically better when what you have to do requires you to do that thing. So I'd rather actually have the shield lob bit, or at least be able to have some class expression where Paladin can maybe go with something that isn't shield lob. You know, they can actually go with some spells instead, though. Granted, that was, I don't think you ever deliberately timed your combo, your ranged combo for those moments, nor did you want to spend the MP on Holy Spirits. But I think you get the point. I'd sooner that the job design reflect some jobs having more interesting ways to handle those situations, or, you know, just saying, suck it up. You know, who cares? Every tank has to do this. You're not any more or less special. Just do the damn mechanic and stop complaining, you whiny bitch. So many tanks whined and moaned about that. I just have no patience for it anymore. Hashtag Mondays with Mrhappy. Hello, Mrhappy. Hi, I've got 2 questions for you. Cool. One regarding the future of the relic weapons, and another about 14's possible future zone design. I think I already have the answer for both, even though I haven't read them yet, but I'll see. Would it be better for the relic weapon to be substat selectable starting from the first step instead of towards the end? I see no harm in it. I don't even think it's about being better. I think there's just literally no harm in it. The reason why it doesn't really matter early on is it's twofold. One, it's not a select weapon that you should be using over the other stuff that's available anyway. So it's kind of irrelevant until the point where it is a select weapon. And the demographic of people who need the weapon for its substats at that time don't have any reasonable thing to do with said substats. So you end up in a situation where the only people that this technically benefits is the people who are getting it for secondary jobs and are actually going to be using it in an endgame raid scenario at some capacity. Now, in my opinion, because that's such a small group, that's also the reason why you should just allow it to be selectable from the start, because who are you really hurting by allowing that if it's technically not supposed to be the best? Like it literally is one of those, you could do it, you could not do it. It doesn't really change a whole lot, so you might as well just do it. As for the second question, probably too late in regards to Dawn Trail Zone since it was announced to be beginning. Do you think it would be possible for the regular open world zones in future expansions to include more things to do and discover rather than relegate that to said exploratory zone? No, I mean, technically there are a lot of things to do in the open world. It's just the individual value on those things is varied and oftentimes very low for a lot of people. Fates, you could endlessly farm them for Gil in Endwalker, and it's very likely that we'll have something similar in Dawn Trail. I'd assume we're going to get another equivalent of the Wivray mount, but this time with a new purchasable item to buy with the bicolored gemstones. So they're guild making, leveling. Obviously, you could throw other things in there, I guess, like Grand Company seals and stuff, but not that anyone thinks. Plus individual achievements and minions or whatever else they actually end up rewarding, including the boss fates themselves. You have actual gathering. They usually have a number of treasure maps that you can do in the open world. So it's a matter of wanting more serious content and not even wanting more things to do and discover, because there's really no doing and discovering. The zone facilitates the MSQ, and anything else that's in that zone is functionally within a few ranges. And there's really no reason to take the open world of 14 and try to glorify it any more than that, because it's not really Final Fantasy 14's strongest point. Final Fantasy 14's strongest point is usually very structured stuff, and it's why even the boss fates spawn in these boss arenas. It's so they can actually make sure that something is structured and capable of fitting within Final Fantasy 14's gameplay and combat system. So I think the answer is no, and I don't really see a reason to do it. If anything, it puts a little bit more stress on people that have to do exploration related stuff, like actual like vistas and stuff like that, which technically there also is. There's sightseeing logs there as well that are one-time goes. So a lot of things are there, but just a lot of people don't consider them when they think of an open world. I really think it comes down to people just wanting raid bosses in the open world, because that's the only way you're actively going to engage people in the open world. I just don't ever see, like, some people say, like, oh, spawning NMs. It's like, okay, but why are you going to spawn the NMs? You're essentially asking for open world boss fights, like not really even like hunts. You're asking for like Eureka or Bozia level boss fights, but why would you do those in the open? You see what I mean? There's like a conundrum between wanting those things, but what to actually do with them. Like, what is their function? What is their purpose other than just filling out space? And they already have more than enough stuff to just fill out space. So I don't see a reason to dive any deeper into that and take away from other content that could be developed that is the more essential Final Fantasy 14 stuff that is more structured, or even that does break the rules, but it's set in these individual areas like exploration zones where they can do more they could do different and experimental things. Hashtag Mondays with Mrhappy. Hi, Haps. Hi. Longtime listener, first time caller. Well, hello. Welcome in. I recently started a new static after coming back to the game, you brave soul. Prog has been fun and quick with guides being out and fights being pretty much solved. The Dawn Trail coming out soon. Do you have any suggestions or tips on how to exercise groups' blind progging skills? The current fallback for everyone is to stop pulling and consult a guide in the middle of the raid. That is a terrible habit to have. So I would highly recommend you look up the item levels for what we call low item level raids. Essentially, instead of going into old content at minimum item level, no echo, you go into old content with no echo turned on, but everybody just equips specific sets of gear that make it so that their stats are usually a little bit weaker than what was available at the time, but they are able to, basically, it allows you to stay at max level and do those fights as if they were current. I've done that a ton. I even just did the Avatar and turn 8 Savage with like a low item level set. We only wiped because of one thing at the very end. So that's what I recommend. But people need to, here's the biggest problem. You can say we're doing blind prog, no one's allowed to look at a guide. That becomes a very difficult thing to exercise when everyone in the group has gotten used to that. Even if it's for the good intention of being ready for like day one Savage stuff in Dawn Trail, they will, and I can guarantee you this, and I don't even fault them for this, they will, as soon as a group beats a fight, pull it up and just watch it over and over again. That becomes the question of, do they know the game well enough to know what they're looking at? That's a huge question, and that's not something that you can technically prepare for any more than just making people raid and forcing them to understand what's happening. So blind progging the old stuff does come in handy with that, but that you really find a lot of people's weakness when some people can learn entire fights and figure everything out with no instruction based strictly on watching a kill VOD versus people who need to be told exactly what to do and what is happening. It's very, very different skill set, and a lot of people can't exercise the latter. Hashtag Mondays with Haps. Hi. Hey, Haps. Really like the idea you mentioned last week about bringing old ultimates up to the current level cap, and DT would be a great time to do that. If they wanted to, how feasible would you think it to be to update one of the old 3 each even patch and 7 point? No. I think this is something they do like on occasion at most. Like I said, I think they would be better if they fill out the patches that don't have ultimates with it. Doing it every even patch, I I don't think that's a good idea. It seems on the surface a lot less work since you would just need to rebalance numbers mostly. And that's a lot of work. That is not a small amount of work. That still has to go through the same amount of QA and like return practices as anything else, any other combat content does. Like, oh, is that too much? No. Okay, is that too little? No. Does that need to be adjusted? No. Does this need, like, every little thing still gets put under a magnifying glass to make sure that they don't screw up the rebalance by just scaling things up. No, I don't think that's A, feasible, B a good idea in the first place. There's already significant balance issues at 70. As time goes on, the game's not balanced for 70, 80, 90 anymore. The school only get worse and worse. Well, it's hard to tell because one big thing was going into Shadowbringers. They absolutely monstrously buffed potencies on a lot of stuff. At 90, some of them got leveled out, but they're already still an insane amount higher than they were in Stormblood. The question really becomes is, do they ever go back to the base potencies of Stormblood, where we'll still be stronger in that old content, but we won't be like blasting stuff in half the time that it used to take, even when we're at like minimum item level with no echo. So I don't think that I think if they do what I suggested, it would be once an expansion at most. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Howdy haps. Hi. I remember before previous expansions, you made a video of things to do to sort of help make a level a little faster, Wonders Tales, Challenge Logs, etc. Don't always keep up with that stuff, so I wasn't sure if you're going to make a new one. Yeah, I essentially regurgitate the exact same video before every expansion and add in anything that may be newer that people might want to consider. The usual advice, though, is that if you pre-ordered, the earrings that you get, they work on monster kills for the first level, so 90 to 91 the earrings work. Wondrous Tales is an easy half a level, and you can prepare one a week before the expansion itself actually comes out, then do another one that same week, so you have a guaranteed level sitting there if you really want to do the second Wondrous Tales, or just so you can be 1 week ahead and have that extra half a level ahead of what you would otherwise, not have. Then there's also looking at the actual fastest leveling methods from 80 to 90 and testing them out and seeing what they actually are. What I might need to do is take a level 80 through Bosia again to see what it's like taking an 80 to 90 through Bosia at right now, and then effectively look at that speed and see if it can be made any faster. Then comparing that to the dungeon speeds, then comparing that to the Orthos speeds. So I'll have to do some of that ahead of time just so I can give people the most informed decision about their fastest Picto and Viper leveling methods, on top of how to get that first level even just to get ahead so you can get into the new roulettes, whether that be on secondary jobs or whatever job you're going to be taking from 90 to 100 first. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Greetings and salutations and a hearty lally-ho. Lally-ho. Dawn Trail is my first expansion, so apologies for the inane question. Hey, it's got to be everyone's first expansion. What on earth is early access? It means you can play the game a few days early. How do you get in? Pre-ordering the game. Can I even get in? As long as you pre-order the game. What are the requirements? Pre-ordering the game. Who do I have to bribe? Square Enix by pre-ordering the game. This was asked less than a day ago, so if you'd watched my pre-order video, you would have had all of these answers. So I would highly recommend subscribe and watch all the videos. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hi, Mr. Happy. Hi, how you doing? I'm doing all right. You doing all right? I'm doing all right. I got a question about using pots in prog like Savage or Ultimates. Let's say you are at a prog point after a pot burst moment. Should you always use a pot there, even if you know you're going to wipe at the next mechanic? It's better not wasting them until you reach the enrage. I am a huge advocate for two different things. One, saving them until you're as close to done with the fight as possible, unless there are micro DPS checks that you use them on just for the sake of consistency in prog. Option number two is to use a lower tier pot when you're getting late into the fight, and then your best pots when you're working on enrage. You can even go an extra step, and instead of using your actual pots, you can bring like high potions and pop those every time you're doing a burst window, just to be in the habit of using a pot in your opener. Because I've seen it sometimes, and I've done this sometimes, where you get used to not using pots at times, and then when the fight's actually happening, you're so engrossed in making sure you don't screw up that you kind of forget to pot. I mean, there's tons of forgetting to pot stories throughout all of the classic Savage and Ultimate clears from creators and hardcore raiders alike. So I recommend building the muscle memory by bringing a weak like healing pot and using it during what would be your otherwise designated pot windows until you actually get close to enrage. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hello. Hi. Hope you and the kiddies are doing well. I'd say so. My question this week might be a bit of a nostalgia. Might all be nostalgia with rose-tinted glasses, but a side of copium, so bear with me. All right. Last week you mentioned Final Fantasy spinoffs, and it got me thinking, what if they remade Dissidia Duodecim for the modern era with online PvP and a battle pass? You went too far with the battle pass right there. I think it would do really well, not just a chance to tell a story, but as a competitive game as well. I think you'd lose people at the battle pass. Dissidia NT kind of ruined any possibility of them doing anything kind of game as a service with the Dissidia franchise. I think if they do another Dissidia game, they need to go back to basics. They're probably better off, just like you said, remastering it and selling it at a box price than trying hardcore to push what was a really tiny ad hoc scene back in Dissidia and Duodecim. NT wasn't that much bigger of a scene, and I don't think that Square has the track record to bank on anything that even remotely comes off as live service. They just don't have a good track record other than their major MMOs. So why force them down another path like that? So I say you had me up until Battle Pass, and that's about it. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hi, Mr. Happy. Hi. No, I'm sober. Yes, you are. Why do you keep asking if I'm high? Hi. Hey. Low. Which dungeon would you like to see again or continued? I'm a bit odd, so I'd like to see Ormvale hard. I don't care, is the truth. When they did do hard mode dungeons, I thought that some of them were pretty cool that we were revisiting, but a lot of the times they often just weren't that interesting to revisit. Like, it might be kind of cool just to see different bosses and how they like reuse the layout at times, but there are plenty of hard mode dungeon quests that did not in any way enrich my experience with the game or the world or anything like that. You've got like Tamtara hard mode, Amdapor Keep hard mode. Wanderers was mildly entertaining, I'll give it that, like in terms of the Tonberries going stabby stab at the end, but a lot of them I don't have ultra fond memories of, other than just their average, like what is the quality of the dungeon itself, which a lot of the times they were good, but it just, I can have good quality and not have to have a hard mode dungeon, if that makes sense. Hashtag Mr. 2-Minute Meta Mondays. No 2-minute meta. Hey, Haps, how you happen? I'm happen. You happen? I'm happen. Good to see your fitness is going well. Started my own journey, lost about 55 pounds. Nice. You're in a similar vein to me. My lowest, I'm like 175. When I'm not like increasing my calorie load for strength training, 185 most of the time otherwise. So it's like 50 pounds. So it's like the same vein, you and I. Question time. Should they bring Faust back as a little treat? There's no reason. There's no good reason. I very much function that there needs to be at least somewhat decent reasons for a lot of this stuff. If there's no good reason, then I don't see any reason to do it. Like even as a little treat. I don't think it's a treat. I think it's gonna be scary to a lot of people. And also it would be a joke now. It wouldn't even matter. They wouldn't make it like before anyway, so everyone just roll over and it'd be really pointless. Hashtag Mondays with Haps. Howdy, Happy. Hi. Just the thing I was wondering in all the Dawn Trail hype, it might be something you can't answer, which is fine. I was wondering if you know a date on when invites to the media tour actually go out. So A, I would never be able to tell you something like that. That's never been a thing in the past. It seems like people have gotten an idea, like they can ask or they should know that information. Since the first ever media tour that was held, I've been of the opinion that nobody should be able to say they've done any such thing, because I've seen the repercussions of saying that you're somebody who went to said event or attended or participated in some capacity on social media. And every time they've let us do it, even if it's like later, like not immediately. And I've always just, it's never met with like a great deal of positivity. There's a lot of harassment that goes on because of that stuff. And there's people who just get kind of really annoying. Like, oh, blink twice if Warrior's getting this, or blink 3 times if this, or hey, Hap, so I know you can't say anything, but, and they do that to all the creators who get to publicly say they attended. And it's just kind of like, oh, it just brings out the worst in people who are just really impatient. And so I honestly, it wouldn't even bother me if there just wasn't a media tour and they just put all the information out themselves at once, because it's not like it would change the content. Like I would still make it all the exact same videos, you know? So it's like, I don't really know what they're going to do with that going forward. If it's going to be exactly the same. There's a lot of question marks because when no creators were invited to the North American Fan Festival, there was not an insignificant amount of noise made on social media from most creators. I didn't really care. I just decided not to go because honestly, it was kind of like a sign to me that I should prioritize something else because, you know, I did go through a lot in the last year. But the question that a lot of creators also had is that a precursor to the Mediator? Because if they're not even going to do A, will they do B? That's not technically a line to draw. So there's question marks about that even in the first place. But you would never be able to find something out like this until someone could publicly state that they were going. Now, I will tell you that historically Mediator has been timed in May. That's just how it's been for all the summer releases. So I'd be shocked if it wasn't at that time. But in terms of an exact timeline, no one's ever going to be able to tell you stuff like that. Hashtag Mondays with Mrhappy. Hey, Haps. Hi. Am I cooking with this one? I'm going to guess no before I read it. Should Unreal directly drop the crafted, glowy version of the respective weapons to incentivize farming it longer than just 2 runs a week? You're right. I was correct. You were not cooking with that one. No. I don't like whenever they add the crafted weapons to anything because they're in deep dungeons at times. And I'm just like, why? They're crafted weapons. Why would you make them drop from anything other than their original intention that is being crafted? Most of them are low-level crafts too, so it just doesn't make any sense to me. Should Savage tiers have extra cosmetics like glowy? No. The amount of complaints in regards to dyeable armor being Savage locked has been palpable. The last thing we want, or that I'd say the larger community wants, and thus the dev team definitely doesn't want to have to deal with the headache, is adding even more cosmetics that are locked behind, or even same item level stuff locked behind Savage. No, this is something that like a small portion of people would want, but all it's going to do is create headaches for the developers. So this is that. And I'd also rather they take that same resource and find rewards for Criterion. So there's a whole heap and hell of a ways that I would rather use resources than to do that. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. This has 6 replies. That's usually not a good thing. I saw the reply button underneath and I'm like, hey, I hope you've been having a good day so far. Yeah, it's been good. Been talking with some friends about it, but I'd like to know your input on it. How would you feel if they added a system similar to Genshin Impact where you could queue into high-end content regardless of progression in the story? No. Been thinking about more sensible choices for people to both experience the story, but without having to play through the entire thing, just to be able to test the high-end content that people talk about. I'd honestly, no. I wouldn't want that in any capacity. Genshin is an easy game for babies. Outside of the Spiral Abyss, there's nothing challenging about Genshin, so they can do stuff like that. And even then, it's kind of griefy. Only a little bit, but it can be kind of griefy. When it comes to 14, we already have an issue with people at max level not understanding how to play the game. If you have people who are queuing into high-end content regardless of progression in the story. Now, okay, I'll give you this. If you mean that they're at least at the appropriate level range, sure, maybe. But the last thing I want is for a level like 42 character to be like, you know what? My friend says he really likes the latest tier of Eden, especially really likes the latest tier of Pandemonium, especially the second fight. I'm going to queue into P10S. No. Not to mention that, unfortunately, it wouldn't work. At least in North America, the culture would already naturally work against it because nobody uses the raid finder. So that would mean that PFs would have to allow these players. Now, don't get me wrong, like a friend might be like, oh, I'm showing my low-level friend this thing and they're just going to sync up to it or whatever. But they couldn't like join PFs that are normal because they'd be screwed. So it'd be completely dependent on a handful of people that are willing to do that. Now, there are people who would like make it a thing. Like we've got the Sauce Ultimate stuff. So you could highly imagine a Sauce Sprout type PF experience, whether it be for Ultimate or Savage or whatever. But you don't want to have the entire thing hinge on that. And I don't think there's any benefit to making them do normal mode raids or like higher level trials that aren't extreme. So I don't see any tangible benefit that's honestly any different than them going to YouTube and just watching it. Like if they really want to see what it looks like, go to YouTube and watch like Final Fantasy 14 Endgame Raid and watch whatever pops up. I'd sooner recommend that than trying to get into the thick of it and just being kind of dead weight or a problem more so than anything else. But yeah, there are way more negatives to this than there are positives. Hashtag Mondays with Mrhappy. Hi, Hap. Hi, I'm back and I have a take alongside some questions. Take, would the 2-minute meta being bad as a straw man argument? It's a lot of straws then. It's a lot of straws. If the gameplay is fun, why bother about the 2-minute cooldowns? But if the gameplay isn't fun, that's the real problem. Well, the gameplay is less fun because it's all built around doing the same thing every 2 minutes. Hence why the 2-minute meta is so heavily criticized, because it forces every job to go through a pooling phase, an expenditure phase, and they all have a little bit too much overlap, even though their thematic ways of getting to that point of power is different, which I do think people overlook a lot. Now to my question, why is it a bad thing that the Endwalker Relic is not grindy if the 2-minute meta is so... What? Endwalker's gameplay isn't really good, but at least it doesn't waste your time? Are you saying that because the 2-minute meta exists, it makes perfect sense for the Endwalker Relic to be tomes? I don't even want to dignify... I almost want to take this question out of the video. That's like building a bridge between like China and like California. They're so far apart, it just doesn't make any sense. What's the bonus question? When do they finally fix the portraits? See, now that's a reasonable question. Never. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Hoppy. Hey, I'm not a frog right now. Where is my frog head? Is it back? Oh, it's you. I don't know if you can really. Yeah, you can kind of see it. It's like the droopy part right here. One of your thoughts on melon mechanics in Ultimate, aka mechanics where players have melon mechanics. That's funny. Interchangeable spots, example of Titan Jails and all P5. What is the reason they keep adding mechanics like these in Ultimates? So it's very simple. Bad players need melons, and good players don't want to put up with bad players who need melons, so they just do melons. It's as simple as that. They put it in there because a good player or a group of good players can solve it normally. There are methods with which we have in the game. Source, not use melons, ever. And I've beaten everything. So obviously that's an extreme because I've been doing this a very long time. But there are players who will never make the effort to not need melons. And as such, they become a liability to all the people who are technically capable of doing it. Which means the people who are technically capable of doing it have to put up with the lowest common denominator of people who can't, which means everybody gets melons. The reason they do it, though, is because it's perfectly doable by the player base. It's perfectly doable by any player. A lot of players just don't do it. Hashtag Monday with Mr. Happy. Hi. I'll get straight to the question. I'm glad you said hi first. That's like not straight to the question. You know what? It works for me. What is up with Square Enix nerfing Paladin survival and buffing the damage on the LB that's like once every 2 minutes? It clearly isn't meant to be used in a defensive manner. So I haven't PvP'd since 6.1. So I'm going to give you, unfortunately, the most textbook honest answer I can give you, that their survival was too strong and their damage on the LB needed to be buffed based on their point of power in the fight and how they were lining things up with other 2 minutes. Seems simple. You know, this whole video, I actually keep like my PC's background noise muted, but I was like, do I hear something in my headset? Dragon's Dogma 2, I'm just like in the menu and I'm just hearing this like occasional like light sound because my headset's not really, the volume's not really up on it. Hashtag hello, Mr. Happy. I like you putting a hello in the hashtag because I noticed there was no hello under, but still. I've been thinking of classes and what they could potentially do in the future. I'm kind of tough on this one. When it comes down to it, I actually hope to see some original ideas from the team rather than pulling from the past. For example, I'd like to see a melee, the melee healer thing again, using a flail and holding some tome or some type of book. It could fit the cleric-like archetype and have traits or abilities. Yeah, so I've covered the whole melee healer, and it's pretty much the same argument as ranged tank. The game isn't built for those things. Like ranged tank makes sense in WoW for stuff like a Shadow Lock tank, for example. But in this game, if you did the same thing, you would just be a tank. Like you wouldn't be any different at all than every other tank because there's no reason for you to be out there when you could be up here. Now for melee healer, it's a bit more of a complicated thing because to define a melee healer, they need to be effective most of the time in melee range. Now, I'm not someone who openly advocates for going strictly to melee, but I can tell you right now that if you do have 2 melee, there's no chance that they're going to allow a melee healer to take a melee spot for any such reason. Now, the counter to that is, well, obviously they can heal from range, it's just that they have melee skills as well. Well, then if they can function perfectly normally from range and they're not at any disadvantage fulfilling their role at range, then they're not really a melee healer to begin with. They might be a healer with a couple of point blank skills, and that's the end of it. So that's always been my argument about why it doesn't make sense. Now, that doesn't mean that they should shy away from giving a broader spectrum of like what types of weapons and gameplay styles that healers have. but being a melee healer, it's kind of like calling Sage a DPS healer. Like that was kind of the idea we were sold on, but Cardia is like not the same thing. Cardia is essentially just an active replacement, and in some cases making it worse than the fairy for Scholar. So it's like, even then it doesn't make sense. And at that cost, like, do I really want a melee healer that's also like got a Cardia situation going on? I kind of don't care. Like you could, and at the very least for like dungeons and more casual content, you have that kind of dichotomy that stands out a little bit more. But in the more high-end structured stuff, you either have to put them at a significant disadvantage to do their role, given the comp that you actually have, or you need to build a comp around it specifically, or they become worse against certain fights. Like there's so many potential problems with it that I'd rather they look for paths to power and not necessarily the weapon that the job is actually using. The weapon matters. Like Sage is really cool with the weapon it has. Astro's weapon is really cool. And then you just got staves and a book. You know, like I still want to see more interesting weapons, but I don't think that a melee healer, in quotes, is any more viable than some of the other things that I mentioned. And that was actually the last one. There was another one that asked if I forgot World of Final Fantasy. So, you know, I said that at the start of the video because there were other comments saying it. There was someone who mentioned about how Assize is horrible game design. You know, I actually did think about it afterwards, and I'm like, well, maybe not Assize, because you're kind of forced to use it on cooldown, because if you don't, you're taking a major hit. But the idea of a multi-functioning skill is there. When you can get Assize to be the maximum effectiveness, it does actually carry a lot of weight. And I think there are ways that you can make Assize more of a decision-making tool and less of a, there's absolutely no shot I could hold on to this for any period of time because it's a massive nerf. So yeah, I did really kind of rethink that example. The Macrocosmos example was probably the best example that I could have gotten, and such. That was the one I should have stuck with instead of reaching into each healer. But you get the idea of abilities that function between healing and damage and don't just fulfill one role or the other. So it gives you more interesting decision making. There's quite a few people that were like, yeah, I don't know why everyone just seems to want to manage 3 dots again, and that's it. And honestly, the answer behind that is that they liked that better than what there is now. So it's kind of like an easy feedback thing. Like, oh, I didn't like doing that. So, or I'm sorry, I don't like doing this, but I did like doing that. So my feedback is going to be to go back to that. It is a natural line to draw, and you shouldn't be that confused, I guess, why people don't like it. I wish it was just a bit more of a discussion than a do what they did before. Because doing what they did before is why the game is the way it is now. Because of feedback, because of the players largely agreeing that a lot of decisions they made were not good ones, or at least not for more than the handful of people that did like those things. So that's the tough part. It's always got to be about moving forward and finding a better solution going forward than you're just giving up and going back to what you had. That's honestly, though, that's such an MMO thing to do. How over the last like several decades, how many times has an MMO done something that's new, that's a little bit more inviting, that's a little bit more able to be understood, and the people who started playing MMOs 2 decades ago, they suddenly age 40 years. And there's like, you know, back in my day, you know, we would fight for 6 minutes to kill one monster and get about like a 50th of a level, and we loved it. Kids today have it too easy. Like that, instantly it's like, go back to the way that it was, instead of trying to think of something to make it better in the future, something that's a little bit more balanced, that has, as Yoshi P has put it, a little bit more stress, but isn't this monstrous wall that everybody needs to climb over to prove that they're real MMO gamers. I've been playing MMOs for 20 years, over 20 years. I don't think that way. I just want that to be more normal. Anyway, that is going to be a wrap for this video, this episode of Mondays with Mrhappy. If you have a question, ask it in the comment sections. Be sure to like and subscribe, and be sure to check out the videos on the other channels as well. Supporting those channels by extension does support this channel. Just a matter of, you know, making sure that I actually have enough stuff to, you know, post onto every channel. So with that, I will see all of you in the next one. I've got a couple of videos planned this week on this channel as well, but you'll just have to wait to see those. Anyway, I'll see you next time, and until then, take care.